I'm Dr. Justine Reilly and I'm the Director for Sporting Heritage, and the presentation today is about how Sporting Heritage responds to the health and wellbeing agenda. I thought I'd start with what our organisation is about and what we're trying to achieve. And Sporting Heritage aims to support the protection, collection, preservation, research and access of sporting heritage across the UK. We work to demonstrate and increase opportunities for sporting heritage to respond to a range of agendas, including education, community engagement and health and wellbeing. So what do? We do loads of different projects and activities, and we're the sector support organisation for those working in and with or wishing to work in and with sporting heritage collections in the UK. So in practice, this means that we deliver a lot of different activities which support the upskilling and development of individuals and organisations through events, research, advocacy, advice and guidance. And we work with a range of organisations and individuals, for example, museums, archives, sports clubs, private collectors, community groups, schools, universities, governing bodies of sport. And our main activities include drawing together all of the information regarding sporting heritage collections, news about sporting heritage related activity, relevant policy and current thinking, research in the field, to both better understand the collections but also to understand the impact that those collections have, for example on agendas such as health and wellbeing. And we capture all of this on our website, which is www.sportingheritage.org.uk. We also manage a network of nations and regions hubs across the UK and deliver a programme of events, conferences and training, mentoring programmes, and generally supporting people understand how they could better become involved in the sector, volunteering and career development, and lots of different discrete training packages. And we provide lots of different advice and guidance. We have a membership programme and a research programme. And we are also managing the flagship campaign programme called National Sporting Heritage Day to raise awareness in the sector. And we manage targeted and delivered projects. So what is sporting heritage? I thought it might be useful to discuss what sporting heritage collections encapsulate. And they're both tangible and intangible collections, and heritage which tells the story of the social, economic and political development of the UK. It's impossible to look at sporting heritage and not, for example, look at women's rights, immigration, workers' rights, social class, or its influence on popular culture. And as a result, sporting heritage engages with individuals and communities in a unique way, which enables these collections to respond to the health and wellbeing agenda. And sporting heritage collections include objects, for example, equipment, kit, medals, trophies, clothing and fan ephemera, archives, for example, diaries, record books, logs and score sheets, film photography, audio recordings, memories, stories, songs, folklore, buildings and structures, and the list goes on. And because until the relatively recent past, sporting heritage was reviewed as something other to museum activity, most sporting collections are held within the communities that they serve. And as a result, often the knowledge is held within those communities. The recent change in understanding that museum delivery is most powerful when it explores everyday culture, is relevant and represents the communities it serves, has enabled museum delivery to look wider and understand the place of sporting heritage as a subject for museums which engages new and different audiences to access their heritage. And by using sporting heritage collections, museums and other heritage venues have a clear opportunity to make a difference in their lives of the individuals and communities they serve, and often reaching people for the first time. And it's only by providing this relevance in our collections that we can aim to ensure that we can respond to agendas such as the health and wellbeing agenda. And because sporting heritage collections held by museums are often not widely understood, and because many are held within the community, sporting heritage provides a unique opportunity for co-curation and meaningful dialogue between heritage venue and community. This is not to say that sporting heritage is the only subject area that provides this connection, far from it. So why is sporting heritage relevant to the health and wellbeing agenda? So health and wellbeing agenda has a focus on increasing access and opportunities which increase physical and mental health wellbeing. This takes many forms, including increased participation in physical activity, including walking through to engaging in contact sports, which in turn has a positive effect on mental wellbeing. It involves changing perceptions on the mental health agenda and encouraging new attitudes to mental illness and the support and opportunities available to achieve increased mental wellbeing. And it involves ensuring that opportunities to access and health and wellbeing services, supports and opportunities is inclusive, varied, easy to access and interesting. And research demonstrates that heritage venues have the opportunity to increase health and wellbeing in individuals and communities. For heritage venues positioned in the centre of communities, often with a public service remit, the health and wellbeing agenda should therefore be central to their thinking. But how does this relate to sporting heritage then, which is something held in heritage venues and sometimes not? The correlation exists on two fronts. Firstly, sporting heritage collections themselves allow individuals and communities to revisit shared experiences, remember important times in their lives, feel a sense of pride and sense of self, and reconnect with happier times, simpler times, or explore difficult times and situations in a safe and supportive way. And wherever access to these collections is made, sports clubs, museums, stadia, these outcomes are largely similar. And secondly, and importantly to the heritage sector, which aims to be inclusive and relevant, access to these collections offers new opportunities for new audiences to access their heritage, to feel welcome in spaces that they thought were exclusive, to feel that their heritage is being valued, and to feel that they can relate to the stories that they see displayed. These are frequently seen as the barriers to museum visiting, and sporting heritage can help to remove these barriers. And these reasons mean that people feel engaged in sporting heritage because it is directly relevant to them. This relevancy engages individuals to take part in new activities, explore new interests and develop a greater sense of themselves and their place within the communities. And it engages communities by exploring the similarities and differences of the self, what unites and what divides, and developing a greater understanding of the opportunity for learning from others through sport and the sporting past. It supports the telling of hidden histories, stories which have been absent from our heritage display and interpretation, in particular those which focus on minority groups, women, disability groups for example, and these communities and individuals whose stories until recently were not seen as worthy for museum discussion. Sport and sporting heritage supports the telling of these stories and the vital position of these individuals and communities within the UK's wider development. So why does this make sporting heritage directly relevant to the health and wellbeing agenda? Well, if we consider that a person's well-being is rooted in their ability to feel secure, supported and of worth, then by ensuring that they are not only represented within heritage culture, but also actively involved in the development of that representation through involvement, for example in co-curation opportunities, there begins to be a wealth of opportunities for increased individual and communal health and well-being as a direct result of participation in sporting heritage activity. So I thought it might be useful to explore some case studies that look at exactly where sporting heritage may be currently being delivered towards the health and well-being agenda. The first one is to look at how sporting heritage links to physical well-being and increasing sports participation. Research tells us that the audiences of heritage venues are traditionally different to those who participate in sport, and this means that there is an opportunity to support engagement with physical activity through the medium of sporting heritage. An example of this could be taken from Mansfield Museum's service, programme of activity which works closely with many different local sports clubs. The aim of the project was to encourage the sports clubs to develop mini exhibitions about the history and heritage of their club. The museum then held an event which drew together all of these exhibitions within the museum and invited those involved to also deliver taster sessions, so people could have a go at the sport there and then. This then led on to signposting to attend activities at different clubs to find out more and to join in. The ethos of the project was to allow the clubs to learn more about their heritage, share it with the rest of the community and engage new people in the club's activity moving forward. Anecdotal evidence tells us that the event proved successful in not only sharing an increased understanding of the wealth of sporting heritage within the community, but also of the increase in sports participation as a result. The key here is also in the variety of the sports included. The temptation is only to focus on the key mainstream sports, but individuals need a choice, and then they needed to be able to try out different sports and work out which one was right for them, and at times, these may often be sports that had never really seemed relevant to them before. Sporting heritage can provide that opportunity for new participation and physical well-being at the same time as increasing our understanding of the heritage itself. So the second area I wanted to look at was increasing opportunities for community engagement, opening up hidden histories and decreasing isolation. As with all of the other examples shown here, a central theme is encouraging community engagement in heritage activity, and at the same time as decreasing isolation amongst these communities. Sporting heritage is a central theme which can often tell the stories of community development and open up hidden histories which had previously been ignored. It can support commemorations, celebrations, partnerships within local communities that are often divisive or difficult. In addition, the key is to look at sporting heritage in its broadest self. The objects, artefacts and ephemera are of course important in and of their own right. However, when they are considered within the wider social, political and economic development of a community, they can take on a new air of importance. An example of this is Wakefield Museum Services' recent exhibition Playmakers. Playmakers started from an understanding that a local community within the museum's remit was a central manufacturer of sporting equipment, including Slazenger rackets and cricket bats. Not only were these sporting pieces an important story of Wakefield's role of the development of sport, sporting science, and thus the progression of sport itself, but of a central role that the factory played in the lives of those living in the community. However, the museum had only 2 sporting objects within its collection and had never told the story of this remarkable sporting heritage before. Consequently, the museum worked to uncover both the oral history of those working in the factory, connect with relations of those who had, and with those who lived within the community and felt its impact in other ways. They aimed to unearth relevant objects which could become part of an exhibition about the sporting heritage of the town and support a longer-term representation of the story. The result was a fantastic exhibition which allowed people to tell their stories, to engage with others from the community to share stories, and to feel a sense of pride and achievement in their activity, and to see the outcomes respected and valued within their local heritage venue. The exhibition attracted approximately 35,000 visitors, and anecdotal evidence suggests that Playmakers attracted first-time visitors who wouldn't normally choose to go to museums, primarily because of either an interest in the sport or a connection to the factory. The impact on the health and well-being of these audiences included a greater sense of self, opportunities to tell their stories and feel valued, and opportunities to celebrate their heritage, to discuss and reminisce with others from within their community. And then leading on from that, I wanted to look at sporting heritage and reminiscence specifically. Reminiscence in its broadest self can be supported using sporting artefacts, archives, film and photography. Conjuring up memories of experienced sport, whether as a participant or as a viewer, sporting heritage collections allow individuals to remember not only the sport itself, but evoke memories of a different time, different feelings and different emotions. Museums in general, which deliver popular culture, exhibitions and activity, tap into this opportunity to engage audiences because they often stir people's memories in a way that other collections find difficult. Individuals are able to talk about their response to specific items, sounds, stories, and when they do, the discussion is rarely focused specifically on the topic at hand itself. Rather, the discussion draws in links to how that person felt at that particular time, other influences and experiences which were relevant to their life, key decisions which were made, and impacts which have affected their lives ever since. The power of sporting heritage is in its ability to act as a catalyst to empower individuals to remember and reflect, to share new and unheard stories, and to reframe discussions on previously underrepresented themes. The value of this interaction is the ability of sporting heritage to allow the individual to remember and to share. And for most people, this is a powerful experience, nostalgic and contemplative. The opportunity for communal reminiscence is also triggered through the use of sporting heritage. Discussions begin with match days, teams, leagues, relationships, and move on to thoughts and feelings, key issues and worries, influences and concerns. And the ability to allow communities to share together in this collective reminiscence supports a greater understanding of different perspectives, different priorities, and in turn shines a light on the things that unite and provide continuity and similarity. Sport provides an oasis for discussion. There is a natural understanding through sport that disagreement will transpire. The very focus of sport is individual against individual and team against team. However, within this is a shared idealism that sport unites. Differences are accepted and celebrated, and using sporting heritage as a lens to encourage this shared appreciation through reminiscence can have a considerable impact on those involved. In relationship to individuals suffering with dementia, this can often provide a brief window of opportunity into their past for their individual and for the family. And this can be illuminating moments of clarity which are triggered by discussions which begin with a sporting artefact, archive or photograph. An example of this activity seen in practice can be seen in the Memories Project in Scotland. Launched several years ago, the project began as a partnership between Alzheimer's Scotland and the Scottish Football Museum. And initially, it began with a focus on football, training volunteers to spend time with people with dementia whose interests including football. The project exemplifies the opportunity of this work to change lives and reconnect people. This quote is from the wife of one of the men attending the meetings. He's a different person when he comes out. It's put new life into him, and you can see that with all of the men there. This is transformational activity which impacts on so many individuals in different ways. I also wanted to think about the other opportunities for supporting individual development and how this impacts on health and well-being, and particularly in respect to volunteering and training. Volunteering and the opportunity to participate in activity which either develops or extends an interest or skill, or engages individuals in social communication and activity, has been proved to support the increased well-being of participants, and many of those working within sporting heritage collections are indeed volunteers. Often they're club historians or holders of the club's records, and often they are unaware that themselves are custodians. In other instances, museums develop volunteer programmes which engage sports enthusiasts with the collections, volunteering their time to share their knowledge and support others to understand the collections too. An example of this is the National Football Museum's volunteering programme. Starting in 2016, the aim of the programme was to increase the diversity of both those who worked at the museum and those who visit it. Working with a number of partners, including the Richmond Trust, the Prince's Trust and Back on Track, the museum has ensured that many different people have been able to volunteer with them to support a variety of different individual needs. The scheme is believed to be the largest of its kind, with a 70-strong team, and the museum states that the outcomes of the scheme for volunteers include newfound friendship, opportunities for training, new skills and new careers, and an increased confidence and sense of self. The museum has supported volunteers at times of homelessness, those improving their language skills and settling into new communities, and those wishing to develop a new set of skills to embark on new careers. It is clear that the opportunities to support mental health and well-being through volunteering in connection to sporting heritage collections is a key outcome for many individuals. To kind of recapping on the main outcomes for health and wellbeing through sporting heritage. Giving these examples above, it's clear that sporting heritage supports the agenda in many different ways. It increases opportunities which benefit physical wellbeing through new access to sports participation. It provides opportunities which decrease isolation. It supports reminiscence activity amongst a range of different audiences. It ensures that individuals and communities feel valued, have a sense of self, and are able to relate to each other through the lens of sporting heritage. It increases access to heritage and culture. It increases volunteering opportunities, and it increases training and skills opportunities. So we work with lots of different types of organisations across the country, and some of those are museums, some are sports-specific museums, but lots of them are local, regional museums, independent voluntary-led museums who happen to have sporting collections or want to work with their communities because sport's really relevant to them. And they know that this will not only help be more relevant in terms of what they deliver, but also be more likely to draw different audiences into them. In terms of the sports museums, the Football Museum has some brilliant examples of how they increase access to non-traditional museum visitors. That's quite staggering, some of the stats that go alongside that. And it's because primarily that people who don't usually see themselves as museum visitors recognise that actually they want to go to the museum because they are learning about football, and the demographics of football tends to be different from museum visitors. So sometimes it can be something as clear as that. And then we see other things like the Playmakers exhibition that I mentioned earlier, where it was a local regional museum who realised that it was a very relevant subject, not just because of sport, but because it was so relevant to their community in terms of having a factory that had developed sporting objects, that they really wanted to make sure that they built that collection. So they spent quite a long time working with their community. So it wasn't just a case of saying, we've got a sporting exhibition, come along. They worked with that community to understand what the community needed, to understand how an exhibition and a collection could be developed that was relevant to that community. So it built up a partnership and some trust and broke down a lot of the barriers that previously might have existed, which then meant different and new audiences came to that museum. I think it would always be really useful to think that just having an exhibition on sport won't make the difference in and of itself. It might make some difference, but there are examples of exhibitions that have happened at museums in the past where they have just put on a sporting exhibition and then wondered why it didn't actually make a difference to their audiences. And it's because those barriers to museum visiting still exist even if the subject matter has changed. And unless you begin to remove those barriers as well, just having the subject matter as sport alone won't make the difference in and of itself, but it goes a long way to supporting that if a museum is ready to shift through that and bring in new audiences. So if people really wanted to start to think about how they can use their sporting heritage collections or develop sporting heritage collections to support the health and wellbeing agenda, there are lots of different things that they can do. Our organisation, Sporting Heritage, can be the starting point. We have nations and regions networks. So if you're in a specific area, you can go onto our website and see which is your relevant regional network or nations network and join. And that provides a localised support of activity, people on your doorstep who are already engaged in this activity and can help you and support you to understand how to better deliver what your aims and objectives are. We also run National Sporting Heritage Day, which is the 30th of September every year. And it's been growing and growing since 2014, and people get involved to demonstrate why sporting heritage is important against lots of different agendas, including health and wellbeing. And for us to see that activity happening and growing and using it as advocacy to say this is really, really important activity, I think it would be valuable for anyone wanting to take part in sport and heritage to think about how they could deliver something against that programme of activity, or even start to see what else is happening around that event and then maybe thinking for the next year how they might get involved. We also deliver a membership programme so people can join us, and then that means that they can get access to more of our training and events, and we deliver an annual conference every year, and we find that that is one of the best ways for different people to come together and share information about what they might want to do for sporting heritage to deliver sporting activity and health and wellbeing activity. And for example, the Playmakers exhibition that I talked about earlier, originally the people that developed that exhibition understood that they wanted to do something around sporting heritage collections, but they didn't really know where to start, and they came to our first conference, were keyed into all the different people that were there, and that helped them develop the conference, develop the exhibition, understand what they wanted to do, and then have mentors to go and look at what activity already happened. So I think there's lots of different ways and lots of different activity that's already happening that people can learn from, and that our organisation can help to tap them into. We are the sector support organisation, so everything that we're about is advice and guidance, helping people understand better how to do this activity and to put people in touch with the network that exists already to support them to do that. Sporting heritage, because it has sport in the title, people naturally think, oh, it's all about helping people participate in sport. And there is definitely an argument that it can be used even more to help people participate in sport. But believe it or not, that's not actually where the health and wellbeing agenda fits traditionally with sporting heritage. It is far more around the mental wellbeing agenda, and lots of our activity is around how people can volunteer with the collections, how people develop a sense of self, a sense of community, how it supports both individual and communal identity because of their reaction to sport, and not just sport in and of itself, but how it fits within that wider political, social and economic agenda. And people are really engaged with sport through that. So you often will see people going to a sporting exhibition where it talks about women's rights, or where it talks about the development of various different workers' rights, and how they engage with that is quite interesting and illuminating to see that people don't just see these different subject matters isolated. They see it, how it relates to them and their lives and their communities, and sporting heritage very much because it fits within so many different communities in different ways, it's very relevant to that. And we've seen examples where families have come together, parents with their young children, fathers with their young children have come to sporting exhibitions and said they're coming for the first time to experience a museum that's on their doorstep, and they'll be back because they didn't realise it was so welcoming, they didn't realise that this was somewhere that they could access. And had they not have come to the event that was there, that was about a sporting exhibition, that would never have happened. And sometimes it can be used to break down some of those boundaries and help people access a venue that they might not have done in the past. So yeah, sporting heritage can definitely help with communal engagement. And because I said earlier on, often although sport can be seen as a divisive kind of tool, I guess, if you like, because it's team against team or individual against individual, because sport is also very much a kind of camaraderie activity. People expect to work together. There's a real ethos of unity and of sportsmanship. That means that actually those issues around team on team tend to not happen. But I think Sporting Heritage provides a real opportunity for discussing those issues and discussing where those problems do occur, but through sport, and using those different things of why is there that underpinning isolation issue, why does that exist, and why can that be used to help different communities understand how other communities live, have developed, and almost kind of a mapping and an exchange project of, you can have a situation where two different exhibitions are created by two different sports clubs, and then they share their information through the exhibitions. And we're looking at projects at the moment where that might happen on a citywide example, so that it starts to break down those boundaries of, well, they're only over there but they're so very different. Actually, well, if we develop sporting heritage, in this instance football exhibitions that are talking about grassroots football, and then we share those exhibitions, and different people go into the different communities and realise that actually we're all very similar, that can help to break down some of those boundaries. So I think I talked about the Playmakers exhibition earlier on. Sometimes, traditionally, because museums didn't collect sport, a lot of collections are quite depleted. But it's a fantastic opportunity for a museum to think, I want to collect more of these relevant collections, and I know that my community hold them. It's not necessarily the museum wants to take those collections on, but it wants to work with the community to better understand what exists, where it exists, help communities to look after them, keep them where possible, but then use them in exhibitions that show what sporting heritage is, why that's relevant to the community. So even if you only have one or two objects, you can still work on those various different types of exhibitions, activities, provision, but it's a really good opportunity to do it with your local community rather than just seeing we've got a couple of objects, what might they be, because it expands the knowledge base, because often the sporting heritage is held in the community, and that's where sometimes the knowledge is held to. So the National Paralympic Trust has only just set up in the last couple of years, and it's very much around commemorating, understanding and celebrating those collections that show why people who had felt that there was no hope could use sport to develop their both physical and mental well-being, and go on to excel within those different areas. And the Paralympic Heritage Trust are working really hard to be able to share those stories, to make sure that people can understand more about how important that process was and still is today, and then use that to inspire other people to access those different sports and to get involved themselves, but also to tell those stories.